It started with a smile. Not mine, his. That crooked, secret kind of smile that blooms when you think no one's watching. I saw it flash across his face one night while he texted someone from the kitchen, thinking I was still in the shower. But I saw it, and I felt it in my stomach before I could even name it. That sinking, unmistakable weight of something being off. At first I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. He said work was hectic, deadlines, late meetings. That's what he called them, meetings. But his phone never left his side. He'd tilt it away when I walked by, or swipe things off the screen too fast. And the way he locked it like Fort Knox? It was enough to set my teeth on edge. Still, I stayed quiet, observing, filing things away in my mind. Then came the moment I couldn't unsee. I passed by him on the couch and glanced down at his screen. And there it was. A selfie. A woman. The same woman I'd met once at his office party, standing too close, laughing a little too loud at his jokes. My chest tightened. He didn't notice I saw. But in that split second, something inside me shifted. That image burned into me like a brand. It stopped being suspicion. It became certainty. I didn't confront him. I didn't even flinch. I just smiled, told him I was going to bed early, and closed the door behind me. But I didn't sleep. That night I started digging. Quietly. Carefully. Social media first, then call logs, then his calendar. I followed patterns, watched habits, and eventually, I planted a tracker under the seat of his car, shaking as I did it, but steady enough to snap the lid shut. It's strange how quickly you learn to compartmentalize. By day, I was the same wife he kissed on the cheek and said goodbye to. By night, I was a quiet storm, gathering pieces of him he thought he'd hidden. I tracked his movements, followed his digital footprints, connected dots he didn't even know he was leaving behind. Each clue made my stomach twist, but I kept going. I had to see it all. I needed to be sure. There were hotel check-ins, not for business trips, just short stays, a few hours here, a night there. I found screenshots of messages, voice notes, even little heart emojis tucked into his calendar reminders. And she was in all of it. The woman from the selfie. Her name was Alyssa. I didn't even need to search long. She tagged him once. By mistake, maybe. And that was all it took. From there, the rest unraveled like thread from a cheap suit. The worst part wasn't the sex. It was the intimacy, the jokes they shared, the nicknames, the stupid memes he used to send me, now copy-pasted to her. That's what stung. The recycled affection. It made everything he did with me feel fake, like I was just a stand-in until the real show started. I cried once. Just once. Curled up in the laundry room with the dryer humming like a lullaby. But even then, I didn't break, because something colder had settled in. Not anger, calculation, the kind that comes when your heart stops screaming and starts planning. I organized every file, every photo, every message. I made backups, dated everything, categorized the screenshots. I wasn't just gathering proof. I was building something. I didn't know what yet, but I knew I wasn't going to waste this pain on silence. Weeks passed like that. Me pretending. Him performing. Every morning I kissed a man who didn't know I'd been following him the night before. I watched him walk into restaurants, watched her arrive minutes later, watched them disappear together like no one would ever notice. But I noticed. I noticed everything, and the more I saw, the quieter I became. Not because I was weak, because I was learning. There's a certain power in restraint. I didn't scream when I found the receipts. I didn't throw his clothes out the window or smash his phone in the driveway. That's not how you dismantle someone like him. No, you do it slowly. From the inside. The way rot takes down a tree. Silently, until the whole thing collapses under its own weight. That's what I wanted. Not revenge. Precision. One night, I sat at my computer, surrounded by folders labeled with dates and names and timestamps. I opened one video, him laughing in a hotel lobby, hand grazing her back, and I didn't feel anything. No rage, no heartbreak, just clarity. The kind that comes after a long, sleepless night. I leaned back, took a breath, and knew exactly what I needed to do next. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply saved every file and started planning. You'd think the rage would come next. The screaming, the confrontations, the broken plates. But that never came. What did was colder, sharper. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a chessboard I'd never noticed before, and suddenly, I could see every piece, every move, and I knew I had to play smarter than I ever had in my life. Not for revenge, for control. I kept showing up as the same version of myself. Same perfume, same dinner conversations, same polite smile, but behind my eyes, strategy. I started watching his work life the way I had watched his private one, his office, his colleagues, his routines. I remembered names. One name stood out more than the rest, Mr. Lancaster, his boss, single, wealthy, charismatic, and very, very fond of intelligent women who knew how to carry a room. I did my research. He was respected but not untouchable, the kind of man who noticed details, who liked mystery, who always seemed bored with small talk. And my husband? He never imagined I'd show up to that networking mixer, the one he swore was just for leadership types. He told me I'd be bored. I smiled, nodded, and picked a dress I hadn't worn since before the wedding. Red, clean lines, subtle neckline, but unforgettable. He barely saw me walk in, but Mr. Lancaster did. He saw me, and more importantly, he listened. I told a story about working with a nonprofit on organizational change. I made him laugh. He offered to refill my glass. By the time my husband noticed us talking, I was already halfway into a conversation about company vision and gender dynamics in leadership. His eyes narrowed. Mine just sparkled. After that night, things started to shift, subtly at first. Mr. Lancaster began sending messages, always professional but always curious. A quick note about an article we'd discussed. A thank you for the conversation. Then came the invitation. A private leadership brunch for progressive voices. No spouses, no assistants, just select guests. I knew exactly what he was doing, and I wasn't just ready. I was waiting. I kept my tone light, my words careful, but my eyes always met his. I leaned into the role he offered me, the captivating outsider who understood the game but never needed to beg for a seat. Every interaction was intentional, every silence calculated, and he started leaning in, literally and figuratively. Compliments wrapped in curiosity, questions that tiptoed across the line. I answered just enough to keep him coming back. At home, my husband barely noticed the change. If anything, he was more distracted, sneaking calls in the bathroom, claiming last-minute meetings. I let him go, let him sink deeper into his little fantasy. He had no idea the ground was already shifting beneath him. He thought I was oblivious, that I'd accepted the lies, but what I was doing wasn't forgiveness. It was construction. Brick by brick, I was building my way out. And while he texted hotel room numbers, I was climbing. Elevators that led to private dining rooms. Conversations that included terms like board initiative and advisory strategy. I watched Mr. Lancaster warm to me in real time, saw the way his gaze lingered a little longer every time we spoke. My husband was chasing lust in secret corners. I was being invited into penthouses. There's something intoxicating about being seen, really seen, after you've been invisible for so long. Mr. Lancaster didn't just look at me, he studied me. He asked questions that made me feel like I mattered again, like my mind was more than background noise to someone else's ego. And slowly, I started to let go of who I had to be around my husband. I started becoming someone new, or maybe someone I'd buried. The flirting started in whispers, a brush of the hand, a comment at the end of a meeting. But there was nothing accidental about it. He knew what he was doing. And so did I. I let him discover me piece by piece, always leaving something to wonder about. We didn't rush. We didn't have to. I wasn't chasing him. I was luring him, and he was all too willing to be caught. At first, I thought I might feel guilty, that maybe I was no better than the man I was married to. But it wasn't the same. My husband had traded love for distraction. I was reclaiming something: agency, power, identity. And when Mr. Lancaster invited me to his suite after a late event, I didn't hesitate. I knew what I was walking into. But more importantly, I knew what I was walking away from. He kissed me like I was something rare, something to be admired. And while his hands traced the shape of my spine, all I could think was, I'm not broken anymore. I'm choosing this, choosing who I want to be. And somewhere across the city, my husband was fumbling with lies in a hotel room, while I was falling asleep in the penthouse. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives in quiet confidence, the kind you feel deep in your bones when you realize you're no longer begging for space, but deciding who gets access. That's where I was. No longer reacting, no longer wounded, just clear. I didn't need to yell or cry or demand anything. I had shifted the balance, and my husband had no idea. Mr. Lancaster, William, became a constant in my world. We were careful, discreet. No flashy displays or office gossip. But there were moments. The way he'd touch my lower back in passing, or how his voice would change when he said my name in front of others. I played my role perfectly. Supportive, insightful, witty without being loud. And behind that polished exterior, I was steering the narrative with a steady hand. He started asking for my thoughts on hiring decisions, marketing strategy, even internal culture. I spoke like someone who wasn't afraid to challenge him. That's what he liked. He didn't want another yes woman. He wanted someone who saw beyond the surface. And I gave him that, in just the right doses. Meanwhile, I let small, intentional truths slip about my husband's stress, his erratic schedule, his inability to separate personal issues from work. It was just enough to plant a seed. HR started poking around, quietly, of course. Anonymous interviews, internal audits. William never mentioned them, but I knew. I knew because I watched the panic start to bubble in my husband's behavior. He was short-tempered at home, checking his email constantly, snapping at the smallest things. He thought the walls were closing in. He just didn't know who was holding the hammer. Every day felt like a quiet game of chess. He moved pieces, thinking he was in control, while I had already mapped out the board. I watched him spiral from across the dinner table. His charm faded. His excuses became sloppy. He was distracted, snappy, tired all the time. And the best part? I didn't have to say a word. He was unraveling all on his own. William and I kept things professional in public, but there was a pulse between us, unspoken, steady. We met for drinks after late meetings, lingered a little too long outside elevators, exchanged texts that walked a careful line between business and something deeper. I never asked for more. That's what made him want to give it. In his eyes, I wasn't just a lover. I was an asset, a partner, a woman who could hold her own in any room. And while my husband thought I was still working on trust, I was refining my leverage. I started keeping duplicates of everything, not just his affair, but his emails at work, the reports he turned in late, the projects he took credit for but didn't complete. I knew how he operated. He cut corners. He talked big, but his follow-through was paper thin. I didn't need to take him down. I just had to let the truth speak and make sure the right people were listening. The day I heard he'd been summoned for a performance review, I didn't blink. I already knew. William had told me, casually, over wine, that certain team leads were under evaluation. I just nodded, swirled my glass, said nothing. But inside, I was ready. Not to gloat. Not yet. I had one more move left, one that would change the game completely. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning. My husband mentioned it casually, like it was nothing. Just a standard check-in, he said, brushing it off. I nodded and offered him coffee, pretending I didn't know that the walls were already lined with the evidence I'd curated. It was strange, really, watching someone walk straight into a fire they built with their own hands. I dressed carefully that day. Neutral tones, minimal jewelry, understated but polished. The kind of look that doesn't scream for attention. It earns it. I arrived 5 minutes early and took the side entrance just as William had arranged. He met me in the hallway with a simple glance. No smile, no touch. Just a shared understanding of what was about to unfold. This wasn't about romance anymore. This was about precision. When I stepped into that conference room, my husband's expression cracked. First confusion, then disbelief. He looked from me to William, then back again. I took a seat beside his boss without a word, placing a neat folder on the table. Inside were documents, reports, timestamps, photos, all of it compiled, cataloged, and impossible to refute. He didn't say anything at first, just stared, and I stared back, calm, quiet, immovable. He thought the worst thing I could do was leave him. He never considered that I might outgrow him, outrank him, that the woman he lied to and dismissed would be the same one sitting across from him in a position of power. And as the door closed behind the HR director, I leaned back slightly in my chair and thought, now he'll finally see who he was really playing against. He walked into that meeting thinking he'd talk his way out of it. That's who he was, all charm and deflection. A shrug here, a joke there. He'd used that same tone on me so many times I could recite it like a script. But today, his audience was different, and his script, worthless. William started the meeting with a neutral tone, just facts, missed deadlines, client complaints, leadership concerns. My husband stammered, tried to laugh it off. He said he'd been stressed, that things at home had been a little rocky. That's when William slid the folder across the table. My folder, emails, time cards, screenshots, photos, all organized, dated, sourced. The color drained from his face. He looked up at me like he was seeing a ghost. And maybe he was. Because the version of me he thought would stay small and silent, she didn't exist anymore. I didn't say anything right away. I let him sweat. I watched his mouth open and close as he searched for something, anything, that would turn this around. But nothing came. Because he knew. Deep down, he knew every word was true. Every receipt, every booking confirmation, every grainy photo from outside those hotel rooms. He had no way out, and the silence? It was louder than any accusation I could have made. Finally, I spoke. Calm. Controlled. You didn't just disrespect your marriage, I said. You disrespected the people who believed in you, who covered for you, who trusted you. I looked at William then. Not for validation, but because I wanted him to see I wasn't doing this for him. I was doing this for me. For every woman who's ever been underestimated. Every wife who's ever swallowed the truth just to keep the peace. He tried to speak again, but his voice cracked. Said something about misunderstanding. That maybe this was all being taken out of context. Classic. Even then, faced with proof, he couldn't own it. He still thought there was a version of the story where he could be the victim. But there wasn't. Not this time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The evidence did all the screaming for me. William sat still, flipping through the packet like it might vanish if he blinked enough times. When he finally looked up, his eyes weren't angry. They were hollow. That look a man gets when he realizes he's not in control anymore. That whatever illusion he built has shattered and there's no one left to clean up the pieces. I wondered just for a moment if he felt regret, but it didn't matter. Regret doesn't undo damage. Then came the final blow. William leaned forward and said, "You didn't just violate company policy. You betrayed a team that supported you, and a woman who trusted you." He nodded slightly toward me, and the room fell into silence again. No one rushed to defend him. No one spoke on his behalf. His mistress? Nowhere to be found. For once, there was no one to hide behind. I stood, not dramatically, just with purpose, picked up my bag, smoothed out my jacket, and as I reached the door, I turned back. Just enough to meet his eyes. "Next time," I said, "think twice before underestimating a woman who knows how to stay quiet." I didn't wait for his reaction. I just walked out. Because I wasn't there to watch him fall. I was there to make sure he knew exactly who pushed the first domino. I remember walking down that hallway like it was slow motion, the way my heels echoed against the tile, the way no one dared look me in the eye. It wasn't shame I carried. It was clarity. For so long, I had shrunk myself to make space for his ego. And now, every step I took away from that room felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he thought he'd buried. He didn't follow me. He couldn't. The man who used to strut through that office with inflated confidence now sat alone, surrounded by the ashes of his own carelessness. Let him sit with it. Let him feel what silence sounds like when it comes from someone who used to protect you. That's the thing about betrayal. It's loudest when it comes from someone who once whispered, "I love you," like a promise. Outside, the day felt brighter than I expected. Not cheerful exactly. Just clean. Honest. I didn't feel victorious. Not in the way people imagine revenge feels. I felt steady. Like the ground beneath me was solid again. Like I didn't have to second-guess my worth every time his phone lit up. I wasn't just free of him. I was free of the version of myself that tolerated him. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. I had one more chapter to write, one more piece to move on the board. Because while he thought the game was over, I was only just getting started. After he was fired, it didn't take long for the rest to fall apart. His reputation unraveled faster than I expected. Whispers turned into rumors, and rumors into confirmation. Clients pulled back. Friends distanced themselves. Even Alyssa, the woman he risked everything for, stopped returning his calls. I heard she blocked him after he showed up outside her apartment crying. The same man who once smirked at his phone now couldn't get anyone to answer it. I didn't reach out, not once. I didn't gloat. I didn't post cryptic quotes or text his mother. I stayed still. And in that stillness, I grew. My world didn't just move on, it expanded. William and I were seen together at events, conferences, private dinners. But it wasn't about romance anymore. People started asking for my input on business strategy. I became someone whose voice mattered. Not because I was attached to power, but because I carried my own. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were moments I questioned everything. Nights where I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I'd become someone cold. But then I'd remember what I survived, what I rebuilt. And no, I wasn't cold. I was focused. I was awake. And most of all, I was finally choosing myself without apology. That's a kind of love too, one that doesn't ask for permission to exist. So I started using my voice, publicly, quietly at first. Initiatives focused on women's advancement, a mentorship program for female interns. I didn't need a title to make impact. Influence doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's in the way you pull another woman aside after a meeting and say, "I see you, don't shrink." Sometimes it's just showing up, whole, healed, and unbothered. Funny thing is, people assumed I must have wanted to destroy him, that this was some grand revenge fantasy. But the truth? I didn't want him ruined. I wanted him revealed. I wanted the version of him that only I had seen, the entitled, careless, slippery man, to be visible to everyone else. That was the real punishment, watching his masks fall away, watching doors close in his face that once opened so easily. He tried to rebuild, of course, reached out to old contacts, tried spinning his story into a misunderstanding, but the narrative had already shifted, and I didn't have to lift a finger. His own words, his own actions, did the work for me. Meanwhile, I was thriving in circles he didn't even know existed. I was no longer someone's wife or someone's problem. I was someone to watch. One afternoon, I sat across from a young intern in the boardroom. Bright girl, nervous, eager, smarter than she gave herself credit for. I saw something in her. That flicker of discomfort when a male colleague interrupted her for the third time. Later, I pulled her aside and asked if she'd like to be part of something I was starting. A space where women didn't have to shrink to fit. Her eyes lit up like I'd handed her permission to be bold. That's when I realized this wasn't just about what he did to me. This was about what I was building from the ashes. A quieter kind of legacy. One rooted in intention, not destruction. I didn't just escape the version of my life he tried to trap me in. I redesigned the blueprint entirely. And the final touch? That was still waiting in a small box by my desk. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address. I dropped it into the mail myself. No note, no explanation. Just a small black box with one framed photograph inside. The very first selfie he took with her. The one that started it all. I had it printed on glossy paper, professionally matted, and tucked neatly into the frame. Stuck to the glass was a single yellow post-it. Just one line, written in my handwriting. This was your beginning. Here's mine. I never asked if he received it. I didn't need confirmation. The silence that followed was enough. There were no calls, no desperate messages. He understood. And for once, I think he finally grasped the weight of what he'd lost. Not just the marriage, not just the job, but the comfort of believing I'd never fight back, that I'd stay quiet forever. He thought he was playing beneath the table. He never imagined I'd end up owning the room. And I do own it now. Not in title, not in some loud, performative way, but in the way people lean in when I speak, the way women feel safe around me, the way I walk into a space and no longer question if I belong. I don't need to prove anything. I became the kind of woman I once looked for when I was scared. And now, I'm her, and I'm not going anywhere. He taught me something, unintentionally of course, that you can burn a life down and still rebuild it stronger, smarter, cleaner. You just have to decide that your voice matters more than your fear. And once you do, the game changes entirely.